This is me, this is my voice, this is what I'm writing, this is who I am, and being true to that is really difficult. And then persistently doing it with precision.
I'd like to welcome to the show Matthew Kalil. How you doing, brother?
Good. I'm really happy to be here, Alex. I'm super excited.
Man, thank you for being on the show. I know you are. I love doing international calls. I love it. I do international interviews. You are in South Africa as we speak.
I am.
What time is it?
Right now it's about 9:30 at night.
Oh, geez.
So you're like all awake and you're like, woo, and I'm like, okay, I gotta go to bed now.
I'm always excited. I'm always excited to do international calls. I just did an Australian call a little while ago. It's so cool to. It's amazing the technology, how it works.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love it. I'm sitting here in Johannesburg and it's like really hot and it's a lovely day. So yeah,
I'm dying. I'm actually one of the places on my bucket list is I got to go to South Africa. I do definitely want to travel. I love it. I would love to go down to South Africa. It really is one of my favorite countries in Africa that I would actually want to go visit. And
you must.
Yeah.
You must. Cape Town. So I'm originally from Cape Town, which is down south, and it's so beautiful. You'll love it. And great to shoot. And any excuse to shoot in South Africa, you should do it.
It is on my list. Maybe I'll do a workshop next year or something like that down there. And maybe I get to fly down there. That would be great. So first of all, man, you have an amazing book out called The Three Wells of Screenwriting, which is one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show. And like we were talking a little bit off air, I'm always fascinated when new techniques or new angles are created to try to tell stories. And at the end of the day, we're all just trying to tell a good story. And there's different flavors on how we get there, whether it's hero's journey, whether it's, Truby's way, whether it's save the cat, whether it's a million different ways. Yeah. And sometimes certain ways just click with certain writers.
Absolutely.
Correct? So I was really interested about your book. But before we get into your book, how did you get into this crazy business?
Wow! Oh, it's a great long story. I'll start from the beginning when I was
a young boy.
13. Yeah, I was a young boy. I was 13 years old. I actually was, and I remember wanting to be a film director from the youngest age. I don't know why. I just loved movies. My dad used to tell me stories about movies, and I used to watch a lot of movies with him. And I remember about 13 walking into the headmaster's office, and it was like careers day where you had to like choose a career. And this was a long time ago because I'm much older than I look. And I walked into his office and I said, I want to be a film director. And his response was, not in this country, you won't. Choose something else. So I was like, what must I do? So I went back, I looked at the map of South Africa. I saw there were a lot of game farms. So I went back and I said, okay, I'll be a game ranger. And he said, much better, do geography. And he ticked me off my list and that was it. So I've wanted to make films from a young age, like from as far back as I can remember. And I remember the first movies I imagined in my head. And I've always been fascinated by it. And I guess, once I left school, and there weren't many film schools in South Africa at the time, so I kind of wandered around and did a whole lot of other things, which we won't get into because there's not enough time.
Sure.
But eventually I studied a master's in screenwriting in Leeds in the UK.
Okay.
And that was after doing some work here in South Africa. I wrote some scripts. I just found that I could do it in a way. And then when I came back with my master's in screenwriting, I started writing sitcom for South African television. And then it just took off from there. And at the same time as I was working as a working writer, I was also teaching. So I was kind of as a parallel, teaching, writing, and working in the writing world, I guess. Yeah. And I'd always try to make one film as well as a director. So I always used to try and make one short film a year. And I guess that's how I got into it. In South Africa, maybe it's a bit like this in the independent scene in the US. You've got to be doing many different things. You've got to be having like many different hats. So I'll be doing like editing, directing, writing, as many things as I could. But writing's been there all along, and teaching writing as well has been there all along. So yeah, I think that answers your question of how I got into this crazy business. And it is crazy. It's even crazier over here.
No, I could only imagine. I mean, I come from a small market as well. In the U.S., I came in from South Florida, and in that area, you have to do 1,000 things to survive, like just to be able to make a living. I made a living in South Florida for 10 years as an editor, as a director, as all that stuff, and it's very difficult. And if you are a smart filmmaker, if you're a smart even screenwriter who wants to get into the business, you need to be able to do more than one thing. So I'm imagining that's the way it is in smaller markets that are not Los Angeles, and even here in LA in the indie scene. If you don't do everything, it's going to cost you money. That's why I could go out and make a $3,000 or $4,000 feature film, because I have a lot of hats that I could wear.
Exactly. Yeah. I think you have to. So that was the way I got in, many different ways, but screenwriting was the kind of through line all the time. Yeah.
Well, that's where it starts. It all starts with it. It all starts on the page. Totally. It all starts on the page.
It starts with a blank page, which is kind of what I talk about in my book. I talk about this blank page that we face as screenwriters. And that's it. It's you're facing infinity every time you write. You're facing that flashing cursor, and that flashing cursor is looking at you saying, you can write anything, but what are you going to write? And this is what we face every time as writers. And it's always fascinating to me that the writers are often the last person anyone thinks about, like down the line, it's like, the screenwriter, God, we've got to pay him, really? Meanwhile, we're the ones that have made something out of nothing to start with. So it all starts with the story.
And it's funny though. I think that goes back to the early days of Hollywood, where screenwriters were literally just treated like absolute crap. Not that it's changed a whole lot, but I think because of the studio system and the glory days of the Hollywood studio system, where they were literally just technicians, and they were just treated like whatever. It didn't matter. It still kind of resonates like that today, where writers aren't treated with a lot of respect in this genre in screenwriting. As novelists, it's different in other areas, but I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we make as filmmakers, as an industry, without question. Now let's get into let's get into your book a little bit. So let's discuss your concept of the 3 wells of screenwriting.
Okay. Cool. So it's really a simple-ish concept, and I'm going to explain it, and then I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise so we can all experience it.
Absolutely.
That's the best.
Absolutely.
And your listeners can also do the exercise. So it's really simple. As I was saying earlier, when we're creating, we're facing this flashing cursor of infinity, which, and we've got to, when we write, we draw from 3 wells within us. This is what happened to me is I've kind of been teaching this for a very long time, screenwriting, and I've taught it in the very traditional form. So I've taught, 3-act structure, writing major turning point documents, and I've looked at all the kind of theories of writing, but a lot of the kind of theories of writing in terms of structure, etc., is once you've written the thing. You've got something out there, now you can structure it. Or in the pre-planning phase, where you're doing a lot of planning, you get stuck in the plan forever and ever. But when you're facing that flashing cursor and you got to write something, what's happening in that exact moment of creativity? And what I did is I kind of slowed down that creative process, which is why the cover looks very zen. It's like this kind of meditative 3 wells, because it's about slowing down the creative process and actually thinking, where do my ideas come from? And when we slow down the creative process, we find that we draw from 3 different wells within us. And the first one is what I've called external sources wells. This is all the movies you've seen, any media you've consumed, anything that you've watched. That's the external sources well. That's well number 1. Then well number 2 is your imagination well. You just kind of make it up. So it's like a lightning bolt from above. It comes down, bam, and you, whoa, where did this idea come from? Oh, it's unique and original, and you write it. And then the third well is your memories, your unique lived experiences, which you can draw from. And I think you, from what I can see from some of your work, you draw a lot from the memory wells. I've seen some of the features you wrote. There's a lot of memory stuff. You've just told me about something else, which is certainly coming from the memory. Yeah. And those are the 3 wells that we draw from. So to experience those wells, and the idea with the book is that there are about 29 exercises. I call them exercises. They're also experiences and explorations more than exercises, which you use to dig these wells deeper. So the idea is that you're never stuck again, because you can draw from these wells at any point when you're facing that flashing cursor. The idea is you don't really face writer's block anymore, which is, the ideal aim of the book, hopefully. And also that you can draw ideas that are unique to you, that you as a writer can only access. And through drawing from those wells, because they move you and they resonate with you, once you put them on the screen, they'll resonate with the audience. And so this all sounds rather abstract, and the best way to experience it is to do an exercise. So are you up for an exercise?
I'm all about it.
Awesome. Okay, good. Fantastic. Cool. So the best way to explain it is to do one of the exercises in the book, which is, I call it the graveyard exercise, also known as, I think you guys call them cemeteries more than graveyards, I think. In South Africa, we call them graveyards.
Cemeteries, cemeteries, yeah. Cemetery.
Okay, cool. So we can call it the cemetery exercise. And in this exercise, I ask people to think of, first of all, if you have to write a scene, right? So it's exterior cemetery, say, day. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting there, and the first thing you think about, so don't think about it, just any images that pop into your head when you say cemetery scene. Just list some for me. What comes in?
A cemetery scene? Zombies popping out.
Okay, zombie
popping out.
That's your imagination. Well, it's great, but you went straight there.
Yeah.
What else?
A cemetery. If you want to go into the memory stuff, when my grandparents.
Don't go there yet.
No. Okay. Just keep first things that pop into my head. Okay.
I love the fact that you went to the imagination well and the external and the memory well first. But like generally, if you had to write a scene, for the images that come to mind, if you think about it,
you have to think about a theme. So I'm going to go zombie. Zombies coming out of the graves. This is all very trite, and we've seen it a million times. But I'm just going to throw it out there.
Yeah, go for it.
Zombies. There's a little girl walking around, and a zombie grabs her on the leg, and she's yelling, and then the hero comes in, who's not a really hero. He's kind of like he's just a normal dude thrown in a weird circumstance, and all of a sudden zombies are popping out, and he's got to grab it and help this little girl who he doesn't know, and the mom's already dead, who was visiting her dead husband. It's all crazy. So I'm just rolling up. So that's kind of like that's
okay, cool. That's fantastic. So what you're doing there, I love the fact that your imagination is going, but a lot of people, when you say like cemetery scene, they're going to say like, trimmed grass, moss on graves, raining maybe it's raining, there's umbrellas. You created a story, which I love, and we'll get into that. But that's cool as well, because you were tapping into other zombie type movies, so your mind went to the movies that you've watched maybe, and the movies that you love, which is clearly horror, and so that's what you filled your external sources well with. So what's quite interesting there is, normally when I say the cemetery scene, people will say things like I've said, trimmed grass, grave, maybe someone reading from a little Bible, a little group of mourners standing around the grave with one person standing aside. So there's all these movies we've seen, and our mind's been sort of colonized in a way by all these external sources that we've watched. So when we write a scene, especially if you have to write quickly, you just kind of draw from that stuff. And that stuff it's unique to you in some ways, because your external source as well is full of zombies and.
Well, yeah, that's the first thing that came to my mind when I thought of a graveyard. I was like, well, zombies, obviously.
Of course, obviously. So that's what you filled your external source as well. It's like all these horror stories, which is why your external source as well is kind of unique to you as well. But that's the external source as well. So now we're going to try something different. And this is the next well, to try and experience this. And I want you to notice what it feels like drawing from these wells, because this book is very experiential. So you kind of experience these wells when you read the book. So that was the first well. It was quick. It was easy. The ideas came. It was just kind of popping out. Let's try the next well, which I call the imagination well. So now I want you to imagine a graveyard, totally made up. See if you can do that.
A totally made up graveyard?
Yeah, something that you're just making up. Anything, images. It can be a scene in a graveyard. It can be anything. Just totally made up. Just invented out of the blue.
A graveyard that has been designed by Leonardo da Vinci. So all the architecture around it, the gravestones are all in that kind of Da Vinci style, design. It could be very peaceful, where people are walking around, enjoying the park-esque kind of things. The grass is trimmed. There is nice moss. The way people are dressed could be a little bit more unique than you normally do, which would be lean towards the Da Vinci design. I'm just using the core idea of the Da Vinci design, and then kind of make it a world around it. And
fantastic.
That's kind of like what
Alec, you're a natural at this. It's actually quite. I've done this exercise often. People really struggle. You just like slide into each one. Anyway, so the what you've done there is quite amazing. Is you've tapped into your imagination well. Most people, when you say So I'm hoping that your listeners are also doing this when we're doing this. So if you guys are listening out there, hopefully you've done the external sources well, and now you're trying to imagine a unique graveyard. A lot of people struggle with imagination because they feel like suddenly they're being almost tested. They're like, oh, is my imagination good enough? Have I imagined something unique? Oh, and there's a lot of pressure on us. Okay. And our imaginations are often like suppressed, and we've been told like when we were kids, like stop imagining, stop playing. So people don't really access their imaginations that easily. But what you've done is something quite cool. You've taken an idea, which is Da Vinci, and you've taken graveyards, and you've collided them together, and you've sparked off this whole amazing idea of like Da Vinci's graveyard. Mm-hmm. And what's cool about that is in the book I talk about this thing of colliding ideas. So you've jumped ahead again in a way.
Sorry.
Yeah, you know. Okay. So the idea is with the imagination, well, is that you can make things up by colliding ideas together. That's one way of tapping your well deeper. But the imagination, you know, you can a sort of graveyard in space. Someone's buried in a glass coffin, maybe. You know, the imagination is just you kind of make it up. And it's interesting. There's normally a moment of pause where you're waiting for the idea to come. And I saw you did it. You kind of looked down, and then Da Vinci came. Mm-hmm. It's quite amazing. Mm-hmm. So that's the imagination well. And tapping into that when we write feels different to tapping into the external sources, which was just like ideas. Easy.
Because it was interesting, if I may stop you for a second, because the external well, when I did the exercise, the external well, I went straight to movies. I went straight to stories because those are all reference points, and I have a vast reference library in my mind of millions of hours of content that I've consumed in my life. But then when I went to the imagination, I was like, okay, what would be really cool? I was like, oh, Da Vinci. I've never seen that before. How about an entire graveyard designed by Da Vinci with those kind of insane designs he did, and then colliding those ideas? It just automatic. And the one thing I want to touch before we move forward is, and you said this, which I think is something that everyone needs to listen to, is when you said like most people get tested, they feel like they're being tested, or they feel self-conscious about it. I've now gotten to the point that I don't give a crap anymore.
Yeah,
so I don't care. I mean, you know, doing a podcast, doing what I do with Indie Film Hustle, I get bombarded with negative and positive all the time. So I just don't care anymore. I've gotten to that point in my life as an artist. I'm like, I don't care what other people think. I'm just going to do what I want. But if you would have asked me the same concept 5 or 10 years ago, I would have had much more difficulty, and I would have been much more guarded with how I put things out. So it's releasing yourself to become free. It's so helpful.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things in the book I talk about as well is play and just have fun, you know, and when you see kids playing and they're just imagining stuff, they're just going, I'm like, what is this world you're creating? That's the kind of ease with which they're creating, because they haven't been like, you know, shut down by all this judgment and negative energy and like, you know, things that's just like, you know, you feel the world's assessing your ideas. Whereas I can see you don't give a crap anymore. You're just going to do it.
No.
I could see that was great. That's well done on reaching that phase in your life. You are clearly an involved filmmaker.
I try, man. It's not easy sometimes, but I try at least.
Tell me about it. Anyway, so I'm just going to go on to the last well, and then we can talk about you know more things. But so the last well, and again, this is an experience. So again, I want your listeners to try and experience this. Is the memory well? Now, this well is, I want you to try a graveyard exercise or a cemetery exercise, and I want you to scan through your life and think about graveyards or cemeteries you've actually been to, and think of some images or people or encounters or stories that have taken place there. Anything coming to mind?
Oh, absolutely. When my grandfather passed, which was a very difficult time for me, and I was at a cemetery, and he actually got into the mausoleum, and I'll never forget the sound of the coffin being dragged over the concrete. They had a plastic kind of like tray, and then they put the coffin on it, and then they slid it in, and the sound is still in my in my head. And when they actually closed it off and sealed it, you know, finally, I remember all that so vividly, and I wasn't very young. I was still probably in my 20s, late 20s when that happened. But I still remember it so vividly, and the emotion that I was feeling that day, because it was such a powerful thing. But I can sense it, I can smell it. I actually remember looking in before they put them in. So when they opened it, I looked in the hole and I saw the concrete hole before they put them in, because I was curious on what the final resting place of my grandfather was going to be like. So that's a memory. That's a straight memory.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. That's, this is the feeling. Can you feel, right? I don't know, that suddenly the emotions are in the room. And that there's like, and like things are moving, and there's like, this is this resonance that I talk about in the book. When we tap into our memory wells, we create scenes that are just unique, and they resonate with that memory, our unique memory. And interestingly enough, you've jumped the gun here, because you're talking about the sounds. And what happens when we write from our memories is that we can activate all our senses. And of course, film is all about senses. It's about the sounds. It's not just about writing, the visuals. It's about trying to paint a scene for a reader and eventually for an audience that's got all the senses activated. And so what I do in the book as well is we talk about memory writing and senses. So we've got these 5 senses activated, and you've got the sound that stays with you. And I mean, can you imagine trying to, even as a filmmaker, even if once you've written the script, trying to describe that sound as it scrapes in, with the plastic on the concrete.
Oh yeah.
And that's just a kind of unique, fresh take on a graveyard scene, right? So that's what the memory well gives us when we write. And you can see in the book, I do tend a little bit more towards the memory well, because I think people are really afraid of tapping into that. But that's the well that's really unique and has got some really, really fresh things in it, and some really, really exciting stuff that you can draw from. So so that's it. So those are the 3 wells: the external sources well, other movies you've seen; imagination well, you make it up; memory well, you tap into it. And what's really important to remember is I'm not saying that you got to write a scene about your grandfather's passing.
Sure.
You may want to, but at the same time, if you're writing a scene where a superhero is, I don't know, maybe Superman's died and they're burying him, and you got to write the scene, you can still tap into that memory and just have that sound of the thing shifting into the concrete. And if you draw from that one moment and stick it in your feature film script, it's going to pop. And someone reading the script will go like, whoa, what is that? That's unique. That's fresh. That's interesting. So you can draw from your memory well and stick it into any kind of thing you're writing, which is quite cool, actually. You don't have to write your story, and that's not what I'm really getting at with the book. Right. It's that you can draw from all of them. So you can write a zombie movie, except in the zombie movie, suddenly you're taking the sound and you're sticking it into the zombie movie, and suddenly you've got this unique moment. And I also really loved what you shared about the like looking into the grave before it went in. That moment just seemed really fresh and interesting to me. And so that's the kind of power of writing from the memory.
So so I can see how these 3 wells can really spark ideas very easily.
Absolutely.
If you're
just like this.
If you're open and free, we've just right here doing this, we've written a scene about if we collide all 3 of the wells together, we have a zombie movie that takes place in a Da Vinci designed graveyard with authentic sounds of a real graveyard inside of it. Unique things that I've never seen anything like that before. Yeah,
totally. No, what I find amazing about this exercise is when I do it, we find these unique ideas, and I think what's great about it is that they're just everywhere. They're always around, and often writers are struggling, and they're like, how can I write the screenplay that's going to be picked up? How can I write a screenplay that's going to be unique and fresh? And I mean, I've read a lot of scripts in my life. I've been a script reader a lot, and you're waiting for that moment where something pops. And you're on the page and you're like, whoa, wait, what is this? And when we do these kind of exercises, we're just always popping, and ideas are just always coming, and they're always there. And the idea with the book is that I'm really hoping that people cannot be stuck anymore, because I think writers, we get stuck. There's so much we're facing. We're facing the infinity, but we're also facing all the pressure of the industry. Is this thing going to make money? Is it, am I going to get, is it going to work? And so people can get really stuck. And the idea with the wells is people can just tap into them and they can dig them deeper. That's the other thing. So the second part of the book, once you've identified these wells, is you can dig them deeper in a really, just to give you a really simple idea, to your external sources well, you dig deeper by either reading more scripts or watching more movies. Simple. Easiest well to dig deeper. But obviously you watch movies that are interesting to you and unique to you, and then your well becomes unique. The imagination well, you do a lot of play, you do a lot of reading, you read up about Da Vinci, you just kind of open yourself up to this imagination, and bam, you can dig it deeper. And then your memory well, well, there's a lot of exercises in the book, which I won't really get into, but there's a lot of exercises around your fears, your happiness, your happiest memory, your saddest memory. Spend some time digging into your past and see what lies there, because there's probably gems there with everyone.
Isn't it funny that Luis Manuel from Napoleon, Hamilton, who wrote Hamilton?
Yeah.
I mean, who in God's green earth would have thought that a book about Hamilton, would be a worldwide phenomenon as it was? And he took from his own experience as an immigrant, his father, and he actually tells his father, that's his father's story, coming from Puerto Rico, and then he just put it all together through hip hop and mix, and he just literally collided 1,000 things.
Absolutely.
And when you watch it, you're just like, well, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's just such a, you want to talk about unique. I mean, and there was no, on paper, it does not make sense. It doesn't make sense. And if you don't know, if the best story is when it was first introduced, it was at the Obama White House, where he was invited to do talk poetry. What did that talk? Was
I know what you mean. Spoken word.
Spoken word poetry.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, I would like to do this little rap I did on Hamilton. And Obama goes, well, good luck with that. And when he says, like, well, good luck, because it doesn't sound like, I mean, come on, who's going to listen to a rap about Hamilton? And it just exploded. And when you saw it, when I saw it, because you see it on YouTube, you could see it on YouTube, that moment. And you could see everybody in the room oh my God! And it's really digging into these kind of wells where he digged into his external, he digged into his imagination, he digged into his memory, and combined them. And I think if you are able to combine these wells, you have something extremely unique. And something else you said earlier, which I want to touch on, is, there's a lot of pressures on writers, and was it going to make money and all that stuff. And I feel that, and I would love to get your point of view on this, is writers, if you ask the question, is this going to make money, you're dead in the water. You can't, I mean, unless you're being hired to write something for a studio for $100 million, that's a different ballgame. And even then you shouldn't think, is it going to make money? You should, what is it going to be in service of the story? What can I do?
Absolutely.
That's how certain movies in the studio systems kind of sneak through, like the whole Batman trilogy that Nolan did.
Yeah.
They all made a lot of money, but boy, did he sneak in a bunch of stuff that normally is not in a studio movie.
Absolutely.
So would you agree with that?
Oh, sorry, was that?
Would you agree with that in regards to like asking a proper question?
Definitely. I think it's breaking up a little bit.
No worries.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Cool. Fantastic. Okay, cool. No, I just heard some. Anyway, it's So yeah, I think I would agree with it 100%. And actually, one of the things in my book is that I'm hoping that writers can write stories that kind of really matter to them. And they don't have to think about like, oh, is this going to make money? Because, look, okay, this is a really big aim, but I've got a feeling you may have similar aims, is that I feel that a lot of the stories, especially feature films that we're seeing nowadays, not all of them, but a lot of them are just like, let's make the next, look, I love the Marvel movies, but, let's make the next Marvel movie, let's make the next thing. And people don't always they're scared of walking on a limb and telling something that matters to them. And these stories that we create are quite fragile. And often these stories, the fragile stories, are the ones that I'm hoping that the book will help tell. Because we all have these stories that come to us sometimes. And they're like these little golden chickens that come and they're like, we've got to tell you, we've got to kind of make this little chicken grow. And it's this kind of fragile thing that we create. And then we kind of, we're afraid that as soon as you start, like you said, as soon as you start thinking about money, it's, is this going to make money? Is this going to, you're already in service of something else. You're not in service of what the Hamilton guy was in service of when he wanted to make Hamilton. That was something totally different. I don't think at any point he was like, is this going to make money? Because if he really thought that, he probably would have gone no, and he would have stopped, right? Because it was so crazy,
right?
But he was in service of something else, and this is kind of what I'm hoping the book will help is people who are in service of these stories that matter to them, and that matter to the world. That's the other thing about the Hamilton stories was so timeless because he was resonating with his own truth in that moment, and bam, there it was, and it was so timeless. It was just kind of perfect, yeah. So. It's a long kind of answer to your question, but I do think that it's not, you can't ask, is it going to make money? It's just it's going to kill you.
You're done.
There's something else. yeah, you're done. You're done.
I think you're putting too much pressure on the actual art. If you cannot allow the art to grow and be what it's going to be, to a certain extent, look, if someone gives me $200 million, I'm not going to just like, hey, let's figure it out. No, I'm not that. There's a physical responsibility. But at the end of the day, if you are honest to the story, you are in service of the story and what you're trying to do, money comes regardless of what you're trying to do. Without question, I feel so many filmmakers and screenwriters put so much pressure on the art. Like, this is the script that's going to blow me up. This is the movie that's going to get me that agent that I've been wanting. No. You can't do that. And but because I talk to so many filmmakers and I see so many screenwriters and I see the guys who succeed and the girls who succeed, and none of them ask the question, is this going to be making money? They did it just because they wanted to do it, and that's where you need to. And it's hard to be there. It's hard to get there. It really is.
Oh yeah. No, it's really difficult. I mean, it's really, really difficult. And I think it's like, like you said, it's not like, oh, fragile, or I'm an artist. It's actually almost the opposite of that. It's like I'm working hard at these wells. I'm digging in them all the time. I'm making them available. And here's my ideas, and here's my script, and it's great, and I love it. Oh, and here's another one. And let's do this one. And it's kind of like constantly working at being freer and loosening yourself up so that these stories come and that you can kind of keep on doing them in a way. Mm-hmm. Because, otherwise it's just, it's this one script that you're holding onto for dear life and hoping it's
for 10 years. Yeah. Anytime I meet a screenwriter, he's like, how many scripts have you written? He's like, oh, I've got this one. And I'm like, is that it? And he's like, yeah, that's the one. I'm like, that's a rough. You've got. You're basically telling. So have I. I mean, I've had that one short film. I've had that one script, and it's like then you're telling me you only won one swing at the bat. When you go up to base, you got one swing, and that's it.
Yeah.
You got no other swings.
I think, if there's one thing that I think your podcast also communicate really clearly is it's not one swing at a bat. No ways, man. You got to stand up there. You got to hit that ball constantly. And then when you're really exhausted and tired and you think you can't hit this ball anymore and you want to give up, but you still want to hit it, then you know that you're a baseball player or a screenwriter. If you know you still want to write the story. I mean, I've written quite a lot of features and I've written a lot of television, and I keep thinking to myself, when is this going to end? But the stories keep coming. Because and I do want to keep telling them.
Mm-hmm. And that's a wonderful place to be. Now, I wanted to also talk to you about, because I think your book really touches upon this, is authenticity as a writer, and I would love to hear what you think of how writers can be more consciously write more authentically, as opposed to only digging into the external well, which a lot of writers do. They just rehash old stuff that they've seen again and again and again, where I think the combination of the three, and because when you watch a movie, that's authentic. You watch something that just comes from a place that you could just feel it. That the writer, the director, you watch Schindler's List and you go, well, that's Spielberg doing what that is really personal. Absolutely. It just oozes off the screen.
Absolutely.
So what's your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that are that, when I started teaching writing, sort of about 20 years ago, I've been teaching this, and a lot of people, when they first start writing their scripts, I don't know why, but I mean, I guess I did it too, actually, probably, is like, I'm going to write a story about a prostitute who meets a gangster, and then they're in, and I'm in South Africa, but in New York, and I'm like, I know nothing about New York, I know nothing about prostitutes or gangsters, right? But yet I'm going to write this thing, and then so what I do is I draw from the external source as well. So I get this half-remembered idea of a prostitute from like Pretty Woman, and then this half-remembered idea of gangsters from like Goodfellas, and then like I kind of what I know of New York, and it just, it's thin. It's really thin. And, you can structure it perfectly. Mm-hmm. You could even make characters that are kind of okay, but it's lacking something. And this is this authenticity thing. It's just lacking depth. Mm-hmm. And so I always thought to myself, how am I going to teach this to students? How am I going to teach people to get depth? Is it something you're just born with, or what is it? And so what I realized is I used to do these exercises with them, and this is kind of where the memory thing came from. I used to do this exercise where I was like, okay, so in your life, there's been one moment where everything's changed. the one moment something happened in your life where everything changed. And students started looking at their lives, and they'd go back and they'd go, okay, oh yeah, there was that time I was mugged. Yeah, that wasn't so nice. Or it could be anything like, there was that one moment when I realized my grandmother was going to die. Mm-hmm. And I was visiting her in the old age home, and I knew she was going to die and she was getting dementia. And that moment was when everything changed. And I get them to write that into a script. Mm-hmm. And what they started writing were these amazing things that were just full of so much authenticity. It was like, okay, so I was mugged, but it was kind of funny the way the mugging happened. And it happened in this random place that you wouldn't think that, like, outside a train station, people were walking by and this guy was mugging me and no one was doing anything. And he was just holding this knife out at me and just showing me the knife. He wasn't like threatening me. All he did was show me the knife. And I'm like, ooh. That just, suddenly it was a lot more authentic than someone taking out a gun and going, I'm mugging you now.
Right, yeah. On the nose, very on the nose.
Yeah, very on the nose. It was just like, I've got a knife. What are you going to do? And the Alzheimer's thing was like, she opens the fridge and something in the fridge has gone moldy. And everything in the fridge is moldy. So she hasn't, grandmother hasn't been in the fridge for a while. She's losing it. And that moment had such authenticity. And then the students would write these scenes. And I remember, I'll never forget when the scenes are read. I make my students read out in the class, so mm-hmm. you read out your scripts because you can suddenly hear what it feels like mm-hmm. and what it sounds like. And I'll never forget that moment after that class. The room was vibrating with this authentic energy, and people were crying and people were laughing mm-hmm. and people were, oh man, it was like colors were popping. It was just fantastic. I had to go lie outside on the ground, and I lay on a bench and I just watched the clouds drift by because it was this great moment of like, okay, this is authentic. Authentic,
yeah.
Yeah. And so I kind of, in the book, I kind of, that's why I kind of draw so heavily on the memory well. That's where the true stuff lies. And I almost, some people can write really imaginative stuff and it can be really, really fun. But if you link it up to your memories in some ways, man, you've got, that's the way you get the authenticity. I really think that's the way the authenticity comes about. And what's interesting as well, just from a writing point of view, is it's happening in television writing in some ways now. Like a lot of the TV series have got this like, it's really kind of real, either because of the research, because this is the other thing. Because of that story I was talking about in New York, if I actually went to New York and kind of researched and walked around the streets and New York entered my memory well, I could have written with a lot more authenticity. Mm-hmm. I always use the example of like The Wire, the TV series The Wire. It's like it just had so much authenticity because those guys lived the life. They were there. Yeah. They were journalists. They reported on it. The guy was, literally the guy who was the homicide division. He'd been there. He knew that space so well. It seeps with authenticity because the writers have activated all their five senses and they've lived those moments. So the idea, I think, with real authenticity is to live the moments and then put them in your script and be brave enough to put those moments in your script and to slow down in that moment of creativity and go, wait a minute. You can even revisit scripts you've written already, and you can go back and you can look at the scene and say, okay, so I wrote this breakup scene and I set it in the bedroom because that's where people break up. And look back at your own life and say, where did I break up with people? Okay, wait a minute. It was actually a sushi restaurant. Or, I don't know, it was like, on the side of the road in the car. Oh, yeah. It was in the shopping mall, in the parking in the shopping mall, in the parking lot. Oh, yeah. And then you change the breakup scene from the bedroom to the parking lot, and suddenly you've got something that's fresh and unique and original. And so that's the way that you can also use the wells. And I talk about in like locations, like changing your locations, sort of locations from life, and then chopping your scene around. And then suddenly what happens is your script suddenly pops all these fresh, kind of unique, authentic. I keep saying authentic. That's not anyway. These authentic locations, yeah.
No, it's funny as you're talking, and I just did a movie that I shot at the Sundance Film Festival, and that film is my many of my stories are in it. Of like it's about filmmakers trying to sell their movie at Sundance. No one had ever done it before, and I was like, but I've been to Sundance 8 or 9 times, so I know the layout of Park City like the back of my head. So when I was writing it and putting it together, I'm like, oh yeah, we'll go over to this restaurant, we'll go over to that restaurant, we'll go into here, we got to take this trip over there. And they're like, oh, that one Sundance I went where I was completely depressed and didn't even know where I was going to go in my life. And I walked down Main Street at 3:00 in the morning and I looked like a backlot. we put that scene in, and you can sense that kind of stuff coming off the screen.
Amazing.
It's one of the things I love that I've done and ever, because of that authenticity of it, because it was it was authentic to my story, but also so many stories I'd heard before from other filmmakers that I've met or have dealt with in my life. But that's what makes those kind of stories so unique, because, and I think you're right, the memory well, it's kind of like the secret stuff. It's the stuff that nobody, it's the thing that puts you apart from the billion of other screenwriters out there trying to get a story told.
Absolutely.
Because just like we did in the earlier exercise, I don't know of anybody else, or at least I've never seen it or heard about it, of the sound of that coffin on a plastic tray being drawn into that's something that's very uniquely mine until now, and now someone will steal it from me. But that's fine.
Of course.
But that's something extremely uniquely my story, my memory. And if we could even just dabble that stuff on, a Stephen King book. Like, Stephen King puts out books left and right, but I promise you Stephen King probably has pulled a lot, like when he wrote Carrie or he wrote The Shining. There's things about his family, his life, his all that stuff that's drizzled in there.
Definitely. And what's interesting is that writers do it almost unconsciously. The good writers I don't know why, they just do it automatically. They just draw from their life. They just draw from their memories. It's a great process, and it's quite a liberating process. And it's actually quite a fun process. And I may even go so far as to say it's a transformative process. Because, we can write from the imagination well, you can write from the memory, from the external sources well, it's already fun and it's light and it's fun. When you start writing from your own stuff and putting some of your own stuff in there, it becomes transformative, not just as a writer, but as a human being. So I find that if people write with some of their own stuff in there, first of all, the scripts are great, much better, stories are better, characters are more interesting, but the writer's experience of writing is better. It's quite amazing. If you kind of write the stuff that is somehow linked to you in some way, it's transformative. It's almost therapeutic. I'm not a therapist. I wouldn't say I am, but it's like it's a little therapeutic. Yeah.
No, there's no question. You exercise some demons when you do that.
Totally. Absolutely, you do. There's a great quote in the book about something about exercising your divine discontent or something. It's in the book, one of the quotes from another writer, and it's great. You exercise some demons.
And again, it is that secret stuff. So people listening, out there, if you're able to pull from your own memories and incorporate them in a creative environment, a creative story. That is what's going to stick you apart from everybody else. And if you're just making that prostitute, pretty woman, Goodfellas gangster in New York, which you've never stepped foot in New York, chances are, even if you know structure extremely well, even if you know character development really well, it's going to be, like you said, very thin. But
something's missing.
But a first-time writer who lived New York. Well, that's why Martin Scorsese's movies were so amazing, like Mean Streets and Taxi Driver.
Oh man,
he lived
Raging Bull. All of
Raging Bull. He lived New York. He understood the gangster lifestyle because that's the guys he hung out with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
it's remarkable.
And
go ahead.
And it's the same as what's interesting though. So Woody Allen is also New York, totally different guy, like totally same city, totally different experience, because their memories of it is so different, their experiences are so different that you have these they both feel they're tonally totally different because their memories are different of these places, but they both have authenticity, which is
also very interesting. That's a really good point, that they have both are known for their New York work. And they're both so different. so radically different experiences.
Totally, absolutely different.
Could you imagine just swapping those two in their life and just like Martin Scorsese's living Woody Allen? Now that would be an interesting movie. And Woody Allen's the gangster?
Yeah.
That would be great. That would be amazing.
Woody Allen character walks into a Martin Scorsese movie, and suddenly he's like, "Oh, hey, sorry, what did I?"
How am I a clown? Well, you're a clown because.
I think it'll be a really short movie.
It would be it's a short film.
The end.
It's a short film, obviously. Now, there's a couple. The other thing I want to talk about is subtext. It's something that writers and directors and filmmakers, they forget about. Do you have any tips on how we can add some really nice subtext to our stories?
I do actually. So subtext for me is, again, I talk about it in the book briefly as well, is that so I'm going to talk about the breakup scene, because it's one of these, our lives peppered, and if you look back through our memories, there are these certain blips that happen, and breakups and deaths and, angry moments are things that kind of pop up. So the breakup scene I kind of use as an example. Often when someone has to write a breakup scene, so your job as a writer is very often like, okay, this guy has to break up with this girl in order for the plot to move forward, so I've got to write a breakup scene. So you're not really, it's not the kind of central reason why you're writing the movie, but for the plot to move forward, you got to write a breakup scene. So you go, okay, they're in bed, and one of them gets up and says something like, I've always loved you, but I think it's time we end it. Okay, whatever. And the other one says,
right.
It's like, okay, well, if you do really, no, please don't leave me. Whatever, I'm just drawing the first thing that comes to mind. And the dialogue is really on the nose. And it's like, but you're getting the scene written. So you're writing it and it's feeling like, okay, cool, I'm writing a breakup scene. And like structurally, you've written a breakup scene, but there's no subtext. It's all on the nose dialogue. It's all exactly what, kind of anyone could write. But if you take a moment to think about, wait a minute, when did I break up with someone? What did I actually say? Yeah. What words were used?
Yeah. I'm going back to my own breakups in my head. As you're saying this, I'm like, we didn't actually say what we meant. We said other things.
Totally. You would never, you don't want to hurt the person's feeling. You don't want to say like, so you get up and you say like, I don't even know what you say. I'm trying to
No, it's just like it's not you, it's me. It's but like but you never like. I remember one of my breakups, and I didn't even know it came, and it was like literally an hour prior to the breakup, everything was fine, but underneath all of it, it was her about to break up with me. And I just was broadsided me because I couldn't read the subtext of her. Obviously for months of what she was doing. Obviously for months I didn't see what was going on, and her discontent with our relationship at the time. But you're right, it was never on the nose. If you do a breakup, it's never on the nose. It's never something that I'm breaking up with you because you leave the dishes out all the time, you don't make the bed, and you're horrible in the sack. Like you never hear that.
Never. But I see it in first-time scripts all the time, in first drafts. You're like, this is just, whoa, what are you doing? And then, where you hear it, and often, the breakup happens with a look. Yeah. Or like a moment or somebody brings you a cup of tea every morning, and one morning they don't. And you look at them, or they bring it and they just put it down, and you look, and there's that one look, and you say, love you, and someone turns away. And you're like, what the fuck? Where's the response? And so for me, the subtext is, and this is again one of these things I wanted to teach writers. How do I teach subtext? I don't know, but we live it all the time. We constantly decoding the world as human beings. We're looking at each other's faces. We're constantly reading the subtext all the time. Mm-hmm. The guy who's serving you your coffee at the Starbucks, you're looking at the subtext, you're realizing this guy's had a shitty day, and your mind, you're kind of reading into everything all the time. And that is what writers need to write in their scripts, is writing that stuff that we kind of and when you see that on the screen, you're like, she's gonna break up with him. You know it already because it's all in the subtext. And I think that's my main advice, is like write from life, write from what you've seen in life, and then look at your script and go, is this realistic to my own life? Has this and then go to your memory well and say, can I draw from something else from there? Is there another way of saying this? And I'd say, that's the thing for me with subtext, is it's obviously not writing on the nose, but it's a lot more about what is unsaid. And, one of the kind of, I suppose this isn't in the book, but because it's kind of one of the kind of more obvious things is like, just if you can show it without saying it, then that's going to be, that's going to be the best, that especially with subtext, it's like, and people never say what they mean. I mean, it's like you say, no one says, I'm breaking up with you because you don't clean the dishes. And never ever happens.
No, it does. It's always something else. It's always something else. Yeah, and you're right. And we are constantly decoding human behavior on a daily basis. But for whatever reason, when we write for the first time, you forget that and you're so on the nose. And it took me a long time to realize what on the nose meant. Because my first scripts were like, I got notes back or I got coverage on it, and they're like, your dialogue's on the nose, and I'm like,
Yep.
I understand the concept, but like, what do you mean? He's going from point A to point B. He's talking about point A to point B.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's just the way the story's moving forward. I don't understand why it's not working. And then all of a sudden, something clicks and go, dude, it's not about A to B. It's about Y to Z. And you got to write about Y to Z while you're doing A to B. There you got something.
Oh, yep.
And I probably have confused more people listening now than before.
Well, it's a really confusing thing. And actually, as writers, we are facing this dilemma because we're not just writing dialogue that happened in life. This is the other thing. We're not, and I talk about it in the book as well. I'm not expecting you to write your breakup scene. That's going to be boring. I'm sorry. It probably is, it's really important to you. But, out of context, if you write a breakup scene, from life, it's going to be boring. We as writers have to also move the plot forward. So we're doing two things. We're moving the plot forward with our dialogue. So we're delivering information that has to do with the plot. And then we're also trying to keep it real, like people speak in real life. And that balance, I think that's where people struggle a lot, because we do have to move the plot forward. They have to break up by the end of the scene. You have to communicate to the audience, they have broken up. Someone might have to say, so we're breaking up. Yeah. Okay, that might have to be in there somewhere, but you don't put that in all the time. So that's the balance that we got to face as writers: keeping it real, keeping the dialogue real, but then moving the plot forward. And very often people just move the plot forward and then they stop keeping it real. And that's the balance. It is difficult, and I think it's one of the most difficult things. I think it's a really tricky question about subtext and why you're reverting to things like A to B and Y to Z, because it becomes quite abstract in a way. And actually, that's a lot of what writing is. It's really abstract. And screenwriting, even though it's a craft, no doubt, and there are a lot of books out there that tell you about, if you plot from X to Y and A to B, and then there's the graphs and diagrams and all these things. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But in truth, no one really knows anything. And you've got to just, it's a fragile beast we're dealing with here, this creativity, especially in screenwriting. And this is what I think is why my book is slightly different to the other stuff, is that it deals with the creative process in the moment when you're creating. And so it's that kind of subtle, and often language fails us at this point. Language fails us, and it becomes art again. And it's quite exciting in a way. Even though, I'm telling your viewers now going, what the hell are these guys talking about? Just tell me how to do it. And I'm saying, there are ways. It's not that easy.
It's not, man. Yeah. It's not. And look, structure is structure. You could do a 3-act structure. You could do a 5-act structure. Yeah. You could do, and that's easy to learn. I mean, that's not hard to learn a 3-act structure. They tell you, they literally are you could Google the hero's journey. Yep. You could Google a 3-act structure and from this page to this page should have something like this happen. At this page. That's a roadmap. But but how to fill that and how to get to that point, because eventually you just will instinctually know the structure. You will get to the point where structure is not going to be an issue for you anymore if you outline your things right.
Absolutely.
It's all this other stuff that makes it really good.
Yep. It's like those early playwrights. You think of Tom Stoppard and these guys. I don't know, these their names escape, but these early playwrights in the 80s.
That Shakespeare guy.
Yeah, well, no, he's too early. Anyway, Shakespeare's another story. But like those guys who are grappling with life and their experiences and they're putting it on the screen, like Scorsese it does it as well, of course. But it's that kind of stuff. How do you get that stuff onto the script? And that's kind of what drawing from these wells is about in some way, but drawing from life and struggling with it, keeping it real at the same time. So
Now, do you have any advice on how to create memorable characters? I'd love to hear your thought about that.
I do actually. Yeah. So creating memorable characters is, again, there's also a section in the book, and I'll use the wells as a way of talking about it, because first of all, you can draw characters from, if we use the wells, your external sources wells. So you can say, okay, well, I'm going to do a character that's just like Rocky. You could. Or I'm going to do a character that's just like Luke Skywalker. Mm-hmm. Or you could do your imagination well. You could do a bit of Harry Potter kind of where J.K. Rowling was sitting in the train. Harry Potter came to her like Zam, lightning bolt from above. A lot of the characters just came to her out of the blue. And you can take like, if you want to create a memorable character, you could take like Rocky meets Harry Potter and collide the characters together. Now you've got the Rocky Harry Potter character. I have no what that is. I know what that could
genius.
Be.
A boxer wizard. A boxer wizard.
Oh my God.
Sharknado. I'm telling you, Sharknado, it will work.
Yeah, exactly. It's in my book. You're ahead. It's like Sharknado. It's like a tornado and sharks. Bam. Okay.
So
but you can do the same with characters. That's what they did.
That's exactly what they did. What can we throw together?
I love it.
It's great.
I love it. And then, but people do this all the time. So one of the shows I wrote a long time ago was like, okay, so in South Africa it was rugby, in America it's American football. So you got an American football player and someone who's really camp, collide them together, and you've got this camp American football player. Interesting. He has a character that's kind of unique. That's using the imagination well. But memory well, man, that's where the unique characters lie. Like, no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah.
I've got this whole system in the book where you go through your character list, even in the script that you've written, and you've written, say you've written a character. So I wrote this scene in a script that I'd written, and I had a scene that was a music store guy working like a clerk in a music store.
Sure,
okay.
Sure.
He was music store clerk 1 or something like that in the script, right? He was random. And he had some dialogue, but he wasn't really unique. And then I went through my life and I looked through all the people that I knew, and I went almost like a Rolodex through my life. And I was like, okay, he was quite interesting. Yeah, this guy was quite interesting. And then I found this guy who was like a goth, okay, like a long-haired, depressed goth, right? Tattooed everywhere, piercings everywhere. And I was like, wait a minute, put him in the music store. And suddenly I had this character that was like really memorable, like not really wanting to work in the store, and like long-haired goth, Sure. And one of my main characters was there, and she was a young mother, and she had this baby in her arms, and she was trying to get her CDs that she was trying to sell out of her bag, and she kind of handed the baby to the goth, and now this goth like holds this baby, and he's like, "I'm sorry, madam, this is not policy in the store," and he's like holding babies or accepting her CDs. We couldn't really tell, but it became quite a memorable and interesting scene that leapt off the page because I was drawing from characters in my life, and we see them all the time. I mean, I bet you, if your readers or your listeners and even yourself just thought back to today, and if you've left the house and you think about who have I bumped into today, it's like, oh yeah, there was this Uber driver. He was really weird. Now, what happens if that Uber driver, and we take him and you put him in a script, in a character in your script, and that's the way I find really memorable characters come from, because they're everywhere in life.
Yep.
But we don't open our eyes. And one of the things that I really am calling for with this book is that we open our eyes a bit more and get off the, look, my cell phone's right here, but get off the cell phone and look around us and open our eyes again and like see the world and see the characters that are around all the time, and then draw from that. And look, it's a cliche, but if you're the friend of a writer, he's probably going to write about you. So,
no, there's no question.
This is where the characters come from. They come from my life. That's it. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm writing about you. That's it.
Oh no, there's absolutely no question. I've done that multiple times in my life where I called up my friend. I'm like, look, dude, you're in the movie. You're in the look. Really? He's like, not only are you in the movie, your name, I'm not even going to be that creative. Your name is in the movie. I'm going to take elements of your life. I'm going to mix it with somebody else, but you're going to see yourself up there. Sorry. And that's the way it is.
It's kind of what people do naturally, but I think very often when you're writing to a deadline or we're writing with some pressure, we kind of forget that that's what we're doing. And so we forget to kind of draw from life and draw from the characters from life. And you go, oh, yeah. So, yeah, that would be my way of creating memorable characters. And it's, but what's great as well about the Three Wells is when you combine all three. So, okay, you've got the goth, and then you've got someone from another movie. So I don't know why I'm thinking of like the guy from Bringing Out the Dead, because I'm thinking of Martin Scorsese now. I'm thinking of the taxi driver, Nicolas Cage's character, and the goth combined together. And now you've got some sort of a goth paramedic. Okay, cool. Wait a minute.
Goth paramedic who's drugged up on some stuff, so he's high.
There we go.
And now you've got a really interesting character.
Now you've got something going there. There's something going there. And so, yeah, so that's how you do it. And if you combine all three wells, then we're really cooking with gas. That's the way to really do it.
And another thing you talked about a couple times here is colliding ideas, colliding characters, colliding stories. Can you just touch on that a little bit more? Because I think it's so powerful. Like, we just did it with Rocky and Harry Potter. I don't know what that character would be, but that could be the germ to start something bigger. It could be the genesis of another character where, all of a sudden Harry Potter learns how to fight, and he's also a wizard. So MMA Harry Potter? Why not?
Yeah.
But he wrestles dragons instead, so he fights dragons physically.
Yeah.
But you see it's going. It's going.
Okay. That's the imagination. I love it. The imagination was just going, and this is what happens with colliding ideas. So the idea is it's almost like a physics thing. You've got these two atoms and they collide together, and as they collide, they spark, and there's that spark that just gets ideas going and gets the creative juices flowing, and then you can create something that's just it's quite unbelievable once that spark happens. But if you're just sitting there with the one idea and the other idea and you don't collide them together, you don't create something. It's actually, it goes back to this sort of idea of thesis and antithesis. Create together, you create synthesis. There's this kind of deep theory of this, which is it's very academic, but the idea is that when you collide two almost opposites together, it's a bit like juxtaposition. You spark off something that is then the imagination well. I call it like a geyser. It like spurts out, and it's like, oh my, you can't stop it. This Harry Potter Rocky thing, I don't know. I'm probably never going to forget it, and who knows where it's going to end up one day. But it's like they're totally random, but you collide them, and then you've got this. And what happens is then it becomes not just a character but a story, because you started plotting earlier. You weren't even talking about the character. You were plotting a whole story with MMA and dragons. You've got to fight the dragons, and so what happens is like suddenly the plot starts coming from these characters that we've collided together. And that can be really, really powerful.
That is. Yeah. Well, that was how like Indiana Jones was created, like an archaeologist who goes around the world getting whip wielding. That was literally Spielberg and Lucas on a beach. Yep, and they were just like, hey, why don't we make a movie about an archaeologist who goes around treasure hunting? Wouldn't that be cool? And he's got a whip and a fedora. And and from there, the rest was born.
Exactly.
It's pretty insane. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests.
I'm terrified. I know what's coming.
All right, so prepare yourself. Okay. But before we do that, you actually told me an amazing, and it's a humbling story about how you heard about me. And I'm not, and I want to just say, I'd love for you to tell the story on air, because it's just something I've never had that happen to me. So I think it's a really cool idea. Yeah. A really cool story. So if you could tell me, that would be awesome.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to draw from my memory well and tell you a story about what happened. So I live in a place called Muizenberg, which is basically like Venice Beach in Cape Town in South Africa, except much smaller. But it's kind of wide streets, lots of skateboarders, lots of surfers. And there was this coffee shop that I sometimes work at. And I'm working there, working on some courses from the book. And I see this guy next to me, and he's got a laptop open, and it's got an editing suite on. So it's got like Premiere, something he's editing something, and which is probably also a bit like Venice Beach in LA. Everyone's just always working on scripts or movies, or like it's everywhere. And so he's working on this thing, and I say to him, hey, how's it going? Because I always want to meet people. That's the other thing. I'm always just meeting people. It's really good advice, by the way. It's like meet people all the time. But so I approach this guy and I say like, oh, you're doing some edit work. What are you working on? He's a stills photographer who's moving into video, and we start talking. And I say, I've got this book, and he goes, oh, it's amazing. Can I take a picture? Instagram. He Instagrammed me with the book. And then I said that I've also got this podcast, because I've also started podcasting, because podcasts are amazing. Awesome. And I've started the Three Wells podcast, which is, and anyway, I mentioned this to him, and he says, have you heard of Indie Film Hustle? And I go, I don't think it rings a bell, but I don't think I've, and he says, you've got to listen to it. It's amazing. So this guy in the tip of Africa, oh my God, in the small little town called Muizenberg, is telling me about Alex Ferrari. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I'll check it out. And he gets my phone, and I start listening to it, and I'm like, oh, this is great. I love what this guy's doing. Alex Ferrari is amazing. So I write Alex Ferrari on my whiteboard in the tip of Africa. I write your name.
Amazing. That's ridiculous.
On my whiteboard, like, contact Alex Ferrari. So I'm thinking, like, how am I going to contact him? I could email him out of the blue. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm in this sort of joint session with other Michael Visser Productions, who's my publishers, and they're really good. It's a bit of a family publisher, and we all meet with each other. And suddenly this woman, Diane Bell, who's a friend of yours, is on this, thing with me, and she says, oh, you guys should meet with Alex Ferrari. And I'm like, yes. I was like, yeah, I want to meet with him. And that's how I ended up sitting here in Johannesburg, South Africa, talking to you in LA. It's like,
I find it's humbling, but I've never heard a story, and it's just I wanted to bring it out because I wanted to make a point of it, which is you never know, as a creator, as an artist, as a writer, what your work will do in the world, where it will reach, who it will reach, at what point it will reach them. So I'm here in in Los Angeles. I sit here in my cave with this little microphone, and Yoda's in the background. Yes, my life-size Yoda's in the background, and I sit there and I talk on this, into the ether, and yet that story is so amazing to me because some guy who I've never met in a coffee shop in Johannesburg is
he was in Cape Town.
Excuse me, sorry, in Cape Town. And he's telling you about my podcast, which then and then how everything worked out is amazing. So I always tell artists, I always tell writers and filmmakers, it is your responsibility to get your work out there. It's your responsibility to tell your stories because you have no idea the impact that your story will have on another human being. It could be just one person who watches a movie you write, watches a television episode, watches a short film that you direct or a feature or whatever content you create, and it can change their life. And I'm not saying that I changed your life or anything like that. I'm just saying as a general statement that our art, our work has the potential to do something like that. So I thank you for being,
I think that's amazing.
I thank you for telling that story. I wanted to make that point.
No, it's good because, the other thing is like when you're in the flow of creativity as well, these things happen. I don't know if you've found this, but once you start just creating and doing and putting stuff out there, suddenly, what you've been doing is like, you're just putting stuff out there and like things start happening and the flow happens. And the next thing you know, I'm talking to you. And like, it's like incredible how that happens, but it's got to do with like unblocking and flowing,
I'll tell you what, when I launched Indie Film Hustle 3.5 years ago, I was blocked. The doors were shut to me. I couldn't talk to anybody, anything. All of a sudden, because I decided to give back and start building Indie Film Hustle up, I have now options to talk to people that I've never in a million years would have. If I would have just, maybe if I would have emailed you out of the blue, I'm like, hi, I'm a filmmaker. Can I talk to you for an hour and just like pick your brain? Like that's not something that you would do. But because of me just putting stuff out there constantly, doors swing open all the time. And I get to have this amazing experience with having a conversation with you on the other side of the world about screenwriting, which is, wonderful. And then on top of that, our conversation is now going to be shared with hopefully tens of thousands of people around the world. And hopefully it will make an impact in their life one way, shape, or form. So it's a wonderful place to be.
Thank you. It is. And I feel very humble and grateful to be part of this.
So let's talk. I'm going to ask you a few questions. What advice would you give a screenwriter wanting to break into the business today?
Okay, that's a great question. It's a really good question. I think, the first thing that came to mind was persistence.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, be persistently yourself, if that's possible. So it's like, this is me, this is my voice, this is what I'm writing, this is who I am, and being true to that is really difficult. And then persistently doing it with precision. Okay, as well, because don't just write any old script and persistently give me that script, and the script is bad, right? That would be bad. Right. But like, persistently be yourself with precision. So read other scripts. Oh, actually, God, maybe that's. You know what? I'm going to take all that back, and I'm just going to say read scripts. Okay, read lots of scripts because I noticed on your page you've got like links to scripts.
Oh, many,
like hundreds of scripts,
hundreds and not thousands now. Yeah.
Please, just so look. If you're trying to break into the industry, I suppose. Look, if you're just trying to write a really good script, then read many scripts. But if you're trying to break into the industry, then just persistently be yourself with precision. I think that would be my bit of advice.
That is an amazing piece of advice because I always tell people the same thing in the sense of be yourself. That's who they can't make another you. And I always tell people like I've meet directors who like, I want to be the next Tarantino. I want to be the next Fincher. I want to be the next Nolan. I'm like, dude, I hate to break it to you. We've got a Fincher. We've got a Nolan and we got a Tarantino. And I promise you, they're so much better at being themselves than you will ever be. So you've got to be the best Matthew. I've got to be the best Alex. And that is it. And that is the secret stuff.
That is it.
Because no one can compete.
That is the secret stuff.
No one can ever. I will never be able to compete with Matthew Kalil.
No.
In the same way that you will not be able to compete with me, in the sense that I can never beat you.
Absolutely.
And you can never be me.
Exactly.
And that's,
exactly.
We are who we are. Period. In whatever we do.
Yeah. And I think we get very caught up as creative people by looking. So I look at you and I go, oh my God, Alex Ferrari's done all this stuff. And he keeps making stuff and he keeps putting part. I've got to do that too. If I don't do that, I'm not successful. Meanwhile, my book, The Three Wells of Screenwriting, is like zen and calm and me. And that's who I am.
That's the different. We're both very different energies. But like, I look at someone like Gary Vaynerchuk. Right? I love Gary Vee. I look at Gary Vee and I'm like, oh man, I got to do more like what Gary Vee's doing. I got to get out there. I got to put more stuff out. I like to look Tim Ferriss. I got to do more stuff like Tim Ferriss and what he's doing. Yeah. It's great to be inspired by other people. But at the end of the day, totally. But at the end of the day, the race is with yourself. Always.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly.
Now, can you tell me the book that had the biggest impact on your life or career?
Wow. Huh. That's a really good question. Sure. Okay. You know what is? I think it is this. It's very bizarre, but I'm just going to go with it. Mm-hmm. Is this really the book? I think it is. Okay, it's Franz Kafka's The Trial.
Okay, sure. That's
it's really weird, but I'm just gonna. So the reason is, I read that when I was really young. I was like, geez, I don't know, like 16, 17, and I read this book, and I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what it was. I knew it was great. And I knew that it was like, I knew it was a mystery. I had no idea what was going on, but I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by the tone, and I loved being lost in that space of not knowing what it was. So I've kind of constantly looked at stories, I think, from that place onwards in a sort of almost literary analysis kind of way to try and like figure stories out. And so I think actually that book, getting that book and reading it at a young age, where I was too young for it. It kind of like,
sir, I'm too young to it. I'm too young for it, sir. It's Kafka. It's Kafka. It's Kafka. Please, we're all too young for it.
We're all too young.
We're all doing it for Kafka, man. We're all too young for Kafka. Maybe at 80 you can start.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to go with that, even though there were a lot of other books that popped into my head. But I think, to be honest, that's probably it. Yeah,
that's a great book.
It made me want to solve puzzles, which I think is my story brain.
That's awesome. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
It links to what we were talking about earlier. And I'm still learning it, definitely, almost every day. And it's just, I am enough.
Yeah, I've heard that before on the show. Many people have said that same thing. It's a great, great lesson.
And I'm actually thinking of almost changing and just going, I am.
Yeah.
And not the enough, because the enough has got a judgment to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I am. That's an impossible lesson, but I'm learning it.
It's very zen. It's very deep, and I agree with you 110%, sir. If you can learn to be in that space within yourself, and like, look, I am comfortable in my own skin. I am. Period. Yeah. Is such a powerful place to be as not only a human being but as an artist. Oof. That's when the greatest art is made. Some of the greatest art is made from people who just know who they are, and they don't care about anybody else. Look at all the great writers. Look at Hemingway.
Yep.
Look at Hemingway, Shakespeare.
Absolutely.
Look at King. All these guys. All of them. They just know who they are. They don't care about anybody else, and they just like, I'm just going to do this.
And you know what's amazing is, and you can feel they're not coming from a place of arrogance.
No.
It's not like, I am this, I am that. It's like, just, I'm doing this thing, and this is what I'm doing, and it's amazing. And they don't even say it's amazing. It's just I'm doing this thing, and like Lynch is he's a master at this. He's just Lynch is doing Lynch.
Oh man, and does he do Lynch ever?
I know. Well, I mean, this is it. I mean, Twin Peaks season 3. I'm like, when I watched that, I felt just like I did when I was 18 reading the trial. It was like, wow, and I was, it was a good feeling though. But he does. He's just in that, and I am.
And just to throw out a quick plug, David Lynch is going to have a masterclass in 2019.
Amazing.
So everyone listening, you go to indiefilmhustle.com and I'll have a link for it there. But I just heard about it yesterday. I was like, oh my God, I want to hear David Lynch talk about his creative process. I've seen his documentaries. He meditates constantly. I love meditating. He's just such an amazing human being. And boy, does he.
Fantastic.
If there's a t-shirt that says I am, boy, that man has it. And then some.
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah.
Okay. So 3 of your favorite films of all time. 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Okay. I knew you were going to ask this. This is the worst question in the world.
It is.
But I'm going to try and answer it. Okay. So, it's going to be really sad because I'm not going to mention any Lynch films but there's so many of them that I would put in there.
Sure.
But I'm not going to do it because what I've thought of is with this question, because I knew it was coming because I'd listened to your podcast before. So I was like, okay, you know what? It's going to be the films that when I was really young, I watched on VHS cassette, and they just left such an impression on me. Mm-hmm. So in my book, I've got this list where we use the external sources well to find your theme, and I list the top 10 movies that have influenced me, and I ask the reader to do the same, and from that you find the themes you're interested in. It's a nice exercise, worth trying. But with this one, I'm going to say, okay, the first one is the Blues Brothers.
Love the Blues Brothers. Love the Blues Brothers, man. They're amazing.
Okay, the first movie. I'm just like, I can recite that movie back with my brother and I. We can just do the lines, and we can just just like that. Like it's really uncanny. I can watch the thing in silence probably and say all the lines.
Sure.
I love the humor. I love the acting. I love the comedy pacing. The pacing is just it's basically like a big blues song. Mm-hmm. The pacing in the editing is just like
mm-hmm. Oh, it's brilliant. It's a genius film. It's a genius film.
Yeah, I love it.
The mall sequence alone with the cars is just, let's not even get. And the Spielberg cameo. I mean, come on, that was great.
Totally. I know. It's unbelievable. I love it. And only later on in life I watched that. I was like, "What is that? Spielberg?
Is that like a 19? Is that like a 19? When was that movie made? In 70? In the set? No, was it 70s or 80s? 80s.
80s.
Early 80s. So that's early 80s Spielberg. All geeky and with the glasses, huge. It was great.
He basically looks like the main character from Ready Player One.
Pretty much. All right, second movie.
Okay, cool. So second movie, I'm going to have to go with something, again, that's really weird and out there. You might, so a surfing movie called Big Wednesday.
Of course. Yeah, of course. That's cool. Who directed that? John Milius. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So this is like After Apocalypse Now, which is also I could put in there as one of my movies, but some sneaking other movies in here. But makes this movie about buddies living and surfing together, spanning many years, and it's just like I watched it when I was younger, and it's just there's something about that film. I absolutely love it. I love Milius. I could watch it again and again and again.
I love Milius.
I think Tarantino once said about that film, surfers don't deserve this film, which is like,
I get what he's saying. And the third one?
Okay. The third one, again, I'm going to go with the movies that I watched when I was younger on VHS, and that's North by Northwest.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So, yeah. So it's kind of Hitchcock, but what happened is the reason that it's so important for me is that, so in the movie, I mean, it's kind of a spoiler alert, but not really, is like the first 10 or 15 minutes of the film, the sort of setup phase, is this guy, and he goes to this place and he gets almost killed, and he kind of gets put in a car and he gets forced off a cliff, and then he goes to the police station and he says, no, this is what happened to me, and he brings them back to the house and everything's been cleaned, and it looks like he's insane, like all of the stuff that happened to him hasn't happened. Mm-hmm. And that's where the VHS tape that I had in those days ended. So I watched the first 15 minutes of the movie and I didn't know what happened.
Oh my God.
So then so later on in life when I watched the rest, I was like, oh, okay, and then I kind of yeah, and then I just loved it. Yeah, so I still really enjoyed it. It's one of those films that I could watch again. The crop duster sequence, that's just like, I can watch that crop duster sequence where he's running away from the crop. I can watch that again and again and again. But yeah, there's many other movies, and I would love to choose them. But I think those are the three that had a real effect on me when I was younger.
Awesome, man. Now, where can people find you and your work?
Cool. So the easiest place is probably the threewells.com, my website. And on that, you got links to my everything, my Facebook pages, my Instagram pages. Those are probably the easiest. I've got YouTube channels with stuff on. I've got a podcast as well, the Three Wells podcast, where we interview local South African at the moment screenwriters, but also we're going internationally about their creative processes. So yeah, if you just Google the Three Wells, you'll find stuff. But threewells.com is probably the best place. And then to get hold of the book, it's everywhere. It's on Amazon. It's on wherever you want to find it. It should be in your local bookstores in LA. And also Michael Visser Productions, their website's mwp.com. And so yeah, you can find me on there. But yeah, I suppose homepage, threewells.com.
Matthew, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show and dropping some major knowledge bombs on the tribe today. So thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.